Can I take your bag, sir?
No, thank you.
Can I take your bag, sir?
It's okay. I got it.
Can I take your bag, sir?
I said no,
I'll
thanks.
take your bag, thank you.
Give me. What are you doing? Give it to me.
Give me
All right. I guess you can take the bag.
Do you live, eat, and sleep the hotel industry? Looking to brush up on your game? You've come to the right place. Welcome to No Vacancy, the hospitality industry's #1 podcast, with your host, Glenn Hausman.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the show, No Vacancy with Glenn Hausman. I am so absolutely delighted to have you here with me each and every week, hearing about the trends, learning all of that and critical insight that's going to reveal all the behind-the-scenes stuff happening in the hospitality industry. I may be your intrepid host, but I can't do anything anymore without a special guest. And this week, I have back by popular demand, Mr. Bruce Ford, Senior Vice President of Lodging Econometrics. How are you, sir?
Glenn, this is such a surprise. We ran into each other on the street yesterday.
I know.
How did this happen?
I know. Well, it happens. You know, sometimes we both plan to be in the same city at the same time. Other times, we just happen to surprise each other by being in the same city. We're talking to you right now from Phoenix, Arizona. I was here speaking at the Best Westerns annual conference. I had the great honor to speak at a couple of their general session panels and really get to be part of the learning process with the brand and educating all of their customers out there. And I had a great time. And I urge everyone out there in the audience to listen to my podcast with David Kong from a couple of weeks ago to learn all about the Shore Stay brand and some of the other announcements that they were going to be making this week. But also check out hotelmanagement.net for my columns 2 times a week, and follow me at Traveling Glenn, so you'll get notified when all the new shows here are posted and all those articles are posted, and sometimes some of the stuff that Bruce Ford is up to.
Oh, look out now. Well, we will be releasing our third quarter new construction pipeline data very, very soon.
Yep.
But one of the things that's interesting about what's going on here, Glenn, and I think kind of inspires our discussion today, is clearly the brand announcements that are out there in the marketplace are starting to get almost overwhelming.
Right.
And the brand announcements that we're seeing out there in the marketplace today are really up and down all the chain scales.
Well, what do you mean by brand announcements, Bruce? Are they offering finer coffee? Are they doing, or what?
Well, really upgraded food and beverage, Glenn.
Hey, look at that.
Just the way that we like it.
Yep.
But the theory is that these franchise companies and these ownership entities, everybody's got to grow. And we're in the time in the market where growing is more challenging because from an operating standpoint, we've reached some peak, okay, or we're very, very, very close. So there's not that much RevPAR growth left.
No, so it's really more about trying to extricate additional dollars out of the customer with other ways on the property.
Correct. So a lot of expansion of offerings at the hotel. But then in addition, it's really hotel brands, as we've had a number of new different brands over the past couple of years that are really beginning to take shape and accelerate. And, of course, with Best Western announcing the Shore Stay brand at the lodging conference a couple weeks ago, obviously we got that second-tier announcement here while we were at convention. And pretty exciting stuff for them in already announcing their first executed agreement.
Yeah, well, it's so interesting that it's such a departure from what they're doing. So I want everyone to be clear on what's happening. Best Western is a membership-based organization, which is very different than a franchising company where a lot of the other organizations are. So Marriott and Hilton, those are traditional franchise companies. But now Best Western is dipping their toes into that franchising world with Shore Stay. So it's almost like a separate company with a different type of philosophy and way of doing business. And here at the Best Western show, you're right, Bruce, they did execute an agreement. And I spoke with some of the franchise guys that are going to be selling the Shore Stay thing, and they said they had long lines of people and an incredible amount of interest. And I'm really excited for those guys.
Well, it definitely brings a new offering into the Best Western family that I think will be well received because at the end of the day, they do have a lot of franchisees or members, if you will, and keep using that term synonymously, okay? It's not that it's a synonymous term in terms of the relationship of franchisee versus member, but
Right.
just so everybody gets the collection of what they're doing.
Right.
there.
So we're talking the difference between a legal definition and our spiritual connection to the brands.
Could be very well just that.
Yes.
Indeed. So I think it's a great opportunity for them, but they're not the only ones expanding now, Glenn. Okay, we have Red Lion and Vantage merger together. That's an expansion that will allow Red Lion to access some of the Vantage franchisees as well as the Vantage franchisees to access the Red Lion offerings. So that should be interesting as well. Of course, Hilton with the new True brand, and we keep seeing more aspects, coming from a number of different untraditional offerings. Montage with the Pendry brand this year was also another one that was new. And
Trump launched another brand as well.
Yep. So we're continuing to see more brands. And why is that? Okay. Well, with the expansion of really kind of the GDS, which is a general global distribution system of hotel rooms available,
Right.
with Google booking rooms now, with booking rooms through so many different OTAs, if you will, okay? The expansion of the ways you can reach a hotel to book a room has really grown very dramatically in the past 6 or 7 years. So the hotel companies and the brand companies are challenged to create a better platform where that can be enhanced. Okay, and the OTAs in some cases are charging more than some of the highest priced franchises out there for bookings.
That's right. But that's only a case of if you're necessarily doing it on your own. If you're part of a major organization such as Best Western, such as Hilton, such as Marriott, they're able to negotiate lower rates that you'd be paying.
In some cases, yes, okay, but also much of what's being created out there today for the new brands is to really access those independents who are getting killed by those OTA fees. And they want to be able to take those independents in, put them under a brand, and offer them more services and more value adds so that they're compelled to take that new brand offering.
Right, and that brand could either be joining a traditional brand, going from independent, full whole hog, into having that flag on your building, or it could be part of that soft brand concept, which we've seen really grown exponentially in the last few years, with a lot of independent hotels wanting to keep 1 foot in the independent world and 1 foot in the branded world where they're able to get access to a larger pool of customers more directly.
Now, is soft brand defined as warm and cuddly?
Yes. Just like the Pillsbury Doughboy. You go up to the soft brand, woohoo, woohoo.
Okay, because it's really meant to be a local hotel.
Right.
Okay, and it is you go to Atlanta, you feel like you're in Atlanta. You go to Phoenix, you feel like you're in Phoenix. It's not that the branded hotels can't deliver on some of that. It's just that you get that better local feeling and flavor. And for some guests, just like there's some guests who want to fly private jets and some people who want to fly commercial and some people who want to stay at the at the economy hotel, everybody's different.
Are there any guests that actually want to fly commercial?
Questionable.
Right.
Questionable. I think if we could all have private jets, Glenn, we'd be fine, right?
I'd really like that. I'll be happy for an autonomous car.
What time is ours leaving today? Is ours leaving today, our private jet headed back to the East
It would
Coast?
be a quarter after never.
Okay. Well, some things we just have to accept. Let's roll the clock back, Glenn, and talk about when we were into the industry 20 years ago and how you considered a brand.
Right.
Okay. So 20 years ago when you were building a hotel in the 90s, okay?
I can't believe that's 20 years ago.
Yeah. You had to have a brand.
Right.
Otherwise, a bank would not really even consider your project.
Well, that's true. I mean, that was we're talking 20 years ago. We think that the internet has been here forever.
Yeah.
But back then, any of the hotel brands that were in the internet were like online brochures. So the internet was irrelevant, and independent hotels had a much, much, much harder time being seen by the typical consumer.
Correct. So if you had a highway location hotel, people drove by, they stopped in, they got a room. It was very, very little exposure outside of that.
I remember doing the family vacations in the 70s and 80s, driving down the highway. Dad's like, all right, I'm tired. Let's stop at the next exit and see what hotel is there.
Yeah. So when you were going to build a hotel 20 years ago, which was quite a building boom, if you really think about back to 1996, we had tremendous amount of public money from Wall Street coming into the hotel business, and there was a lot of development that occurred. There was a lot of acquisitions. There were a lot of new public companies. And some of the companies that we see today were just really beginning to be formed.
And I think that's also where the today's select service business really had its roots. I mean, of course, there were always select focused service hotels, but that really was the era where it started to really become a major part of this business.
Sure. So the efficient branded hotel, you would have a select service hotel is something you would select. And it was, from the lender's perspective, a better guarantee of performance. Okay. And that better guarantee of performance, again, it had a better guarantee of my loan's going to perform and you're going to be able to pay me back. Okay. So 20 years ago, you would have to select a brand, and that brand could even go continually under more scrutiny for not necessarily being good enough.
Right.
Okay. So today, why do we have so many more brands? Well, it's not as much of a requirement today to say that if you want to build a hotel, you have to have a brand. Okay. There are so many more non-traditional lending sources that are considering in urban centers where the rate has changed such in the past 20 years that an independent hotel could survive, if not thrive. Okay, so in some of these non-traditional lending environments, you just see more contribution of equity into the deals in some cases, so people can choose to build these brands and just contribute a little bit more cash to balance the deal out, if you will. So we're seeing these soft brands such as Autograph and Curio. One of the things that I did recently was to analyze kind of how were they doing, and I was surprised with how many new construction Curios and Autographs there actually are, because when they first came out, you would have perceived that those would be conversion brands.
Right, absolutely. And I think it's interesting now that hoteliers are starting to say, I'm going to build my boutique independent hotel, but I'm also going to affiliate with this soft brand right from the get-go, something we hadn't really seen at the beginning of this era.
Sure. So now we have soft brands, and and each company has one, of course. Hyatt has the Unbound collection.
That's a great name, by the way.
Starwood had the Tribute collection. Marriott has the Autograph collection. Hilton has the Curio. And then there are some other soft brands out there that we're continuing.
Choice's Ascend collection, for example.
Correct. Now, Choice's Ascend collection, would you believe, Glenn, they have 108 open locations?
No. I'd also say Best Western's got a soft brand, too. I think all the major companies have soft brands. 108.
Yeah.
That's great.
And that's pretty good growth for the period of time that they have. Now, Ascend is kind of, don't quote me here, I can't remember if it's actually
you're quoting yourself by talking on a recording.
Upscale or upper mid-scale. I'd have to look that up. I can't quite remember. But the point being is that Ascend is being well received by Choice's franchisees and has some nice growth. Now, Autograph continues to open new construction. We have a new construction Autograph in Boston called the Envoy Hotel, which is extremely well received.
Right.
And has now got one of the best outdoor spaces at a hotel in Boston. It's not a rooftop patio, but they are very close to the harbor in Boston, so they actually have an unobstructed view of the harbor, and I think it's on the 7th or 8th floor.
That's pretty cool.
So I don't think we'll be going out there in January, but at the same time, it works pretty well for 7-8 months a year.
Maybe they could do one of those ice bars.
They could. Well, you go to New York now, and with the rooftop experiences in New York, many companies are figuring out how to close them in so that they can be used throughout the year.
Yes, they've got these great, I guess they're called nano walls or something like that, these big glass walls that can open or close. I love that, because the rooftop bar in the winter enclosed gives you that indoor outdoorsy kind of feel that's fun and unique and different.
So have you been up there when it snows yet?
No.
Okay.
I'm too busy trying not to be in the city anymore when I'm home on Long Island.
That's right. You've officially passed on to middle age.
That's right. Yes.
So how are we selecting what we're doing today, Glenn? And we thought that this would be interesting to cover because the dynamics of the industry are changing quite a bit.
Right.
And the dynamics of the industry and the way that they're changing Marriott is now a 30-brand company. Okay, Accor, Fairmont, Raffles, and Swiss Hotels are together.
Yep.
We ask ourselves, is Accor going to get back into select service in the United States with that? Then you have Vantage and Red Lion merging together. Okay, you have a couple of other mergers that have occurred. Starwood Capital has sold Louvre Hotel Group. You had Carlson being purchased by the Chinese company.
Right. Then some of the independent companies have joined forces as well.
Correct.
Let's not forget Kimpton being bought by IHG. I feel like we could do
That's almost 2 years ago now.
But I feel like I feel like we could do this consolidation game for the rest of the show. It's insane how much things happen.
Everybody's got a finger on a few of them, but when you start to add them up, there's been 14 or 15 significant merger or acquisitions really since the beginning of 2015 over this 2-year period. So what that really tells you is the growth is there. People are ravenous to grow. Now, if you're an owner in 2015, you probably never made more money with your hotel portfolio than you did last year.
Well, I would hope that that's the case.
So what you got to be thinking about at that point is, how am I going to leverage those new dollars I have? Okay. And so you've been actively looking to buy some hotels. Mm-hmm. You've been actively looking to expand your management contract business. You've been actively looking at, should I be building? Okay. And since the beginning of 2015, we've gone from 110 multiple developers with 3 or more new construction projects in the U.S. to 250.
Whoa, say that again?
Okay. Since the beginning of 2015, we had 110 multiple developers with 3 or more projects in the active new construction pipeline.
That is pretty significant.
In the middle of this year, we're now at 250.
And that is over the top unbelievable.
Yeah. And 25 of those 250 companies have 10 or more projects.
Wow. How many of those are real projects or, we'll see what happens kind of projects?
Okay, I'm going to put on my Lodging Econometrics hat now, Glenn, and it says to
enter
enter my database,
right?
You must have land under control
right.
and be a going forward concern in the marketplace that I can verify in 2 places.
Right.
Okay? So when I label that developer as having that project, he owns that piece of land. He's going forward to try and build it. Now, will every one of those open? We know they won't. Mm-hmm. Okay? But if you're active in my database, you've got a real shot at it. Okay? And today in the market, the new construction is so robust, if you reach that start in the next 12 months category, you're about 75% likely to actually open.
That's pretty good odds then.
Yeah. So early planning is actually in decline in our database, and it's in decline because we're not quite seeing the rush of full-service construction yet and or the luxury upper upscale new construction because these select service hotels are doing so well.
Right. Yeah. So, okay. So these hotels are all doing well. There's a, land rush going on to build new hotels. Let's talk a little bit about whether or not they're going to get branded, independent, or just be soft brands. What are the numbers looking at?
So a couple different ways you can do it now. So here in Phoenix, we were talking about last night that we're going to have a dual-branded Marriott Courtyard and Residence Inn done together, same building, plus or minus 300 keys altogether.
And nationally, we're seeing a lot more of those projects take place in not just urban centers, but suburban areas as well.
Sure. It makes a lot of sense in the urban center because you're able to, bring that extended stay product into the marketplace, which has a lower overhead, which is why it's always been popular, but pair it together with that select service hotels and run the things together. There's got to be some pretty good synergies for that.
Yeah.
Where you can put services in an extended stay hotel that you wouldn't otherwise be able to afford in an urban center. But the development costs for that particular hotel seemed fairly excessive.
Right.
Okay. And you got to be a long-term player in that situation. Okay. So the second kind of development would be a boutique-style 125-room urban center boutique hotel.
Right.
Okay. Mm-hmm. If we're within here of a couple blocks of the convention center here in Phoenix, I haven't found one of those yet.
No. Well, there's a Hotel Palomar.
Yes.
2 blocks from here.
2 blocks. But it's larger, right? It's
yes.
250 rooms or
probably.
something?
I didn't look, but you could just, by looking at the structure,
right.
It looks like it's pretty serious size.
Now, we're seeing 125-unit boutiques come into some of these cities now, okay? But here you have very, very large traditional big box, upper upscale.
The hotel that
hotels.
we're sitting in now is a real giant convention city.
Right.
Style
Been here
hotel.
for a long time.
Yep.
Okay. The hotel that I was staying at, big giant convention center hotel, been here a long time, going through a very big remake right now.
Mm-hmm.
So in Phoenix, it appears that that's still kind of an undone downtown small boutiques. We haven't really seen a lot of those yet. But you get a lot of boutiques in other places in Phoenix because we have the high-end market in Scottsdale. You have the football stadium out in Glendale. You have the colleges out there. So you have other places to put boutiques other than the urban center, which might be different than, say, Nashville. Okay, Nashville, the urban center is, kind of a 10-block radius.
Right.
And that's where you put them, right? A little bit different here. Mm-hmm. Nashville doesn't have that high-end suburban spot. Okay, if it's not by Opryland, there's really no other high-end.
So it's not like Atlanta and Buckhead.
Correct. Or Boston and Cambridge.
Right.
Or New York and Brooklyn. Or D.C. and Arlington. Okay, it doesn't have that compared. But we have seen the pipeline in Nashville double in the past 12 months.
Right, which makes me wonder, typically I'd be like, ooh, doubled. What, they have 2 hotels that being built?
No,
going to 4. No, this is a lot of hotels going to
54 to
a gajillion.
108.
That is unbelievable for such what I would consider a small market as a New Yorker,
Yeah.
That's incredible.
But we've both been to Nashville many, many times, Glenn, and we enjoy what that city offers. And I was trying to talk to some developers about it and say, well, what makes you select Nashville and what makes you want to take a page out of one of the major hotel companies? And really what they said is it's a long-term play because we believe this city, similarly to Austin, that it's got more broad generational appeal.
Right.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And we think the millennials will want to come here for years to come.
But you really think that market could support all of those
Now,
hotels?
I'm quoting other people here, Glenn, okay? Because I'm not invested personally in a hotel in Nashville, okay? But when you remake a market, you build a bigger convention center, you put a new indoor arena, okay? You develop new demand, okay? Which is what Nashville is going for. It's also got some appeal in the fact that it's not – they have winter there, but not quite the winter you have in Boston or not quite in New York, okay? It's kind of the tweener area, if you will.
Right. Yeah, I don't mind, when it's 40s, 50s. It's not like the zeros that we get.
Right, which is some of the appeal that Atlanta has. It doesn't snow every year in Atlanta, but it does get down to freezing, if you will. So Nashville kind of being a secondary offering, kind of shooting off Atlanta. And what is the other reasons that people pick Nashville? Well, these new brands, okay, they all want to go into the urban center. And if there's urban center development opportunity available with new demand centers, people are jumping at it.
All right, I got a question about all the brands going into urban centers. How much of it is smart development compared to how much is, oh, golly gee, we have this brand, we have to be downtown at any expense?
Okay. Well, 10 years ago, Glenn, you probably would have heard a story about people saying people are going back to the cities. Okay.
Yeah.
And
I see it. I see it in New York. A lot of the moms and dads of
selling the big house in the suburbs,
exactly. That's
buying the apartment or the condo downtown and going backwards.
Yep.
Okay. So when you start to think about the demand generators for that, okay, cool hip restaurants and cool hip places where I don't feel out of place. So some of the boutiques that come in are fine with serving that baby boomer generation.
Right.
And some of the boutiques that come in want to serve the millennial generation. Mm-hmm. So where's that line going to be drawn, Glenn? Are we going to say baby boutique? Papa boutique. I don't know.
I like that, though.
Baby boutique, Papa boutique.
Yeah.
I don't know. Fresh out of school, went to school 80 years ago. I don't know.
Right.
But there may be some separation in that. And one of the things that we've seen is that even the chain scales that we mark hotel brands with, okay, that says like-type rates and like-type services, it's almost time to tear that out again, too, because we're going to have full-service hotels in mid-scale.
Right.
Okay, part of what the Best Western with the Sure Stay brand is they're going to take hotels into mid-scale. I mean, with food and beverage. That is a restaurant that you go to 3 meals a day, which has not happened before. Okay?
Right.
So the line is getting blurred again because select service is generally defined as upper mid-scale and upscale, and now we're going to have full-service hotels ranking below that.
Well, I never really felt that the descriptors that we've been forced to use are really applicable to a lot of what we experience. I've been saying, quasi full-service hotels for brands like Hilton Garden Inn, which have the look and feel of a full-service hotel in many ways. They just stripped out some of the things and services that I'm not necessarily needing, like Bellman.
Yeah.
Just those simple things that you don't need, but you still have the food, you still have the booze, you still have an active lobby, all of those kinds of things. So I do think that we need to totally examine, rip apart, and rebuild how we're going to classify these hotels.
I don't think it's far away, and maybe in the next downturn we'll start doing that because that's typically when it happens.
Maybe we should do it. Just me and you come up with our own classification system and then force everyone in the industry to
we have
submit
our
to
own
will.
class of system, Glenn. It's called the Glenn and Bruce Show. Okay? So, which is why we're here today. But trying to go, just a little bit further to define how I select brands. The brands are obviously kind of stacked up today in a way where you have to determine whether you're going to be a restaurant that you're going to want to operate or you're going to lease a restaurant space.
Right.
And that kind of is decision number one. Decision number two, are you going to be kind of a rooms only with not many suites, or are you going to have a number of suites that you want to be marketing? Then kind of the third thing is that your demand putting you in the $200 to $300 a night, $100 to $250 a night? Are you above $300 a night? So you're kind of determining what you're doing there. And then I think you really do have to decide: are you going after the younger traveler? Are they supposed to feel good here, or are you comfortable with servicing the baby boomers?
Right. That's very interesting, and it's a lot of stuff that people have to figure out. One warning I would be is, if you're going to be shooting for the millennial generation, you need to consider how their habits are going to change in the next 10 years as well. I'm very uncomfortable with people making declarations that this is how a generation is supposed to behave, and I think that is a little bit of a trap.
Well, people do want to be on the forefront to make those comments and to be seen as forward-thinking, but as fast as things have evolved over the past 10 years, Glenn, I mean, the next 10 years should be a doggone rocket ride.
And the good news is that here at the No Vacancy Podcast, we will be here evaluating it every step of the way. That's right. I'm threatening right now to be here for the next 10 years doing this, and hopefully, Bruce, you'll be here doing it with me.
Oh, I would guarantee that, Mr. Hausman.
Yeah. Bruce, how can we find you?
On lodgingeconometrics.com, in addition to Lodging Econometrics on LinkedIn, Lodging Econometric on Twitter. I'm BFINH on Twitter. And, of course, keep an eye open. In the next week, we'll be talking about the third quarter new construction pipeline very soon.
Great. We'll have you back on the show to talk about that pipeline as well as other important topics. Well, topics I think are important, but everybody else may think are irrelevant. Be sure to like us on iTunes. Remember, give us 5 stars on there. I really want to build this show, and I need your help. Tell friends, tell family. Heck, tell the guy at the bodega how much you like the show, because we want to build our listening audience. Make sure you follow me at Traveling Glenn, 2 G's in a row, 2 N's in Glenn, on Twitter. Follow me on Instagram at the same name, and read those columns, 2 times a week in Hotel Management Magazine, hotelmanagement.net. Or send me your comments to glenn@rouse.media. I want to give an extra special thank you to Bruce Ford for totally carrying this podcast today, because I am pooped. And I know this probably wasn't my best performance. That's okay, because Bruce Ford's a rock star, and you guys are amazing for listening to the show. I want to thank you, and we'll be right back after this message.
Have a question for your host, Glenn? Tweet him now at Traveling Glenn. No Vacancy, the hospitality industry's #1 podcast. We'll be right back.
Get a $50 Best Western gift card when you stay 2 separate times. Plus, enjoy breakfast and free high-speed internet. Rewards members get even more when you book direct at bestwestern.com. Visit bestwestern.com for terms and conditions. Each Best Western branded hotel is independently owned and operated.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the No Vacancy podcast. I'm really excited today. I've got myself some very interesting guests. And for those of you listening that are not part of the hotel industry, I think you're going to find this particularly fascinating because I'm talking with a group called AAHOA, the Asian American Hotel Owners Association. And these guys are really the backbone of the entire industry, and it's something the general public doesn't really know about. So I have with me today Mr. Chip Rogers, the president of the organization, and Bruce Patel, the chairman of AAHOA. Gentlemen, how are you today?
Glenn, great to be with you. Thanks for having us.
Hey, for sure.
Great, Glenn. Thank you for having us here today.
So, I know a lot about you, so I'm going to just kind of pretend I don't know anything about you. So that way it sounds like, the conversation will be a lot more, organic and that sort of thing. What I find really interesting is how powerful of an organization you are today. Bruce, maybe you could just give me a quick summary of where you are now, and then we'll roll back the clock a little bit and talk about the history of the company, the organization.
Glenn, we're the biggest kept secret outside of the hotel industry.
That's right.
Did you know that?
I did. I did, because anytime I have a conversation with people and I mention AAHOA, they just look at me really, really strange. Like, what are they? What is that all about?
Inside the industry, everyone knows who AAHOA is because we're such a large player of the hotel industry. But to give you a background for folks that may not have heard of AAHOA, we're the Asian American Hotel Owners Association. We're 16,000 members strong. Members that own almost 1 out of every 2 hotels in this country. Started 27 years ago, this association started with immigrants that migrated from India into this country just trying to get and achieve the American dream.
Absolutely.
And, fast forward 27 years later, that first generation and now second generation and even third generation hoteliers have really taken over the development of hotels in this country. And we're very proud of the story that AAHOA members and the contribution that AAHOA members have provided to this industry.
That's pretty fascinating, Chip, that nearly half of the hotels in the country are represented through your organization. That's quite the accomplishment.
Well, it is, but it's not something that, number one, happens overnight, and it's not something that happens very easily. If you think about the forefathers of AAHOA, who, again, 27 years ago in Atlanta, Georgia, started this association, and many of them literally drove vehicles from hotel to hotel to hotel asking people, hey, be part of our organization.
Right.
That's the way it started. Now we have offices, headquarters are still in Atlanta, office in Washington, D.C., where we've become one of the major advocates for the entire industry across all levels of government. And it has become a force that everyone is recognizing as really the association for owners, and we like to think of ourselves that way.
And I look at it I see all of you with the pictures of all of the leaders of Congress and the president and all of that stuff all the time, so I know that means you're big time.
Well, we try to be small time, but big time, if you know what I mean.
Yes, I do.
And I think that's part of the real growth success is that
right.
When one of our hotel owners calls the office, we take care of their problem, or at least we attempt to take care of their problem. So we really tell our members there's no problem too small. When there's an ordinance passed in a city of 500 people, we're still going to try to help work on that. But we're also going to go to the halls of Congress and work on the largest issues facing the entire industry.
And that's what I find is interesting, how the organization has really transformed itself over the years to be able to focus on industries that are really relevant to the entire hospitality industry as general. And I want to talk about some of those issues, but I'd like to give a little bit more texture to where it came from. And what I find fascinating about this is how it started with the immigrants, Bruce, how it was created by a group of people that didn't feel that they were necessarily being represented in the right way, and it came out of a need to be treated equal as everybody else. And speaking as as a Jewish guy, I understand that sometimes there's discrimination out there, and that was what it was like for your parents and grandparents that came over and had little choice but to kind of find their way in this.
Let me paint the picture, Glenn, a little bit even better. 45 years ago, when immigrants in India, living in small villages, living in poverty-stricken conditions, they had to make a decision that how do we get upward mobility in a country that wasn't offering it at that time? And a lot of families had to make the hard decision to send their kids across an ocean into this land of opportunity that was called America. And they did it for one or two major reasons. One, either you get out of this country and go make it somewhere else, and America was the best possibility, and go get educated.
Right.
So, like my father came to this country 45 years ago, and the primary purpose was to get educated and see if he can create a better life for himself and his family. And he did that, but thousands of other immigrants did that, flocking from India, in debt, but mind you. And they came here with no money. Like I said, they were in debt, so that created an automatic financial burden and barrier. They did not understand English very well, so they had a language barrier.
Right.
And they surely didn't know how America worked, and so therefore a cultural barrier. And barrier after barrier after barrier in this country 45 years ago, eventually they realized we have to persevere because the alternative was worse.
Yes.
And when they did that, they picked a niche market business at that time, the motel business.
How did they find their way into the hotel business? And like I understand the Chinese found their way into restaurants and dry cleaning because they were kind of forced into that direction because of, society really made them go. And those are the only areas that they were accepted to be in. So how did it wind up that this intrepid group of people first started in the hospitality industry?
So there were the first few immigrants realized this business where they can live at the motel, they can work every shift, they can clean every room, and save every dollar because they can actually expense their so-called rent and electricity and phone bill to the business. It was a win-win. Now, how'd they get into the motel business? Because they sure weren't getting any loans. They didn't have any credit.
Right, because the first guys that came over here, how do you come up with all of that cash to get in that first property?
So the first few of them had to borrow a lot of money, number one. Where did they borrow the money? Our one, I guess, advantage of our community is we're very close-knit. And a lot of handshake deals were done back then. A lot of borrowing was done back then. A lot of saving from jobs had to be done. I'll tell you, there are people who bought a business before they bought a car. It's crazy. But when they eventually got into a business like the motel business, they had to come up with $25,000, which was at that time a lot of money.
It's still a lot of money for a lot of people today.
Yeah, and they had to borrow most of it. They had to save part of it. And then the rest of it was seller financed by a lot of owners at that time because no banks were going to give money to an immigrant with no credit. And so when the seller financing option opened up in this industry back then, it opened the door for a lot of immigrants to get into this
What's
business.
a seller financing option mean?
Yeah, so a current owner decides he wants to sell his motel or business, for that matter, it could be any business, and he realizes that the buyer may or may not have the credit worthiness to go get a loan. So one option, and it's a risky one, is take the down payment of the buyer and say, I'll seller finance as if I'm the lender to you, the buyer, the rest of it. Usually those terms are one-sided to the seller, obviously. And it's a big risk to the buyer because he or she has a very high probability of losing his down payment and any money he or she might have put into the business if they go into default, which has a lot of ways to get into default at that time.
Right. So what strikes me as interesting is how it seems that it's not just all of India, not just a state of India, but really a small area of India where all of these people came from. And I feel like there's a heightened community family aspect that, tell me if I'm wrong here, where it's people started to come over and the folks that were here first looked after the other ones and brought them over here, and then they were able to go off on their own and then help other people.
Yeah, you do have that right. Originally, it was a lot of immigrants from the state of Gujarat in India. And when they did come, and some of them settled for a couple of years in America, there's an obligation in our community as a whole to help thy neighbor. And they helped their community neighbor, and they helped folks that were coming from India because the barriers were just too great, as I mentioned before. And if you were one of the few lucky few to overcome a few of these barriers, it was your duty to help the next guy and next woman to overcome those barriers that they were going to be challenged with, and make it a little bit easier for them.
The original pay it forward.
That's right. That's exactly what that was.
That's pretty amazing and really impressive. And to see where such a small little thing from 45-ish years ago has now turned into half the hotels in the entire country, or nearly half, is absolutely spectacular. But let's go now, fast forward a little bit to the beginning of the AAHOA Association. What was the rationale behind it? My understanding was that a lot of the Asian American hoteliers didn't necessarily feel they were being treated right by some of the major brands, and by maybe getting together, they were able to level the playing field for all of them.
Yeah, 27 years ago was a different time in America for a lot of demographic groups.
It is, and I don't want to make it seem like that's the way it is today.
Correct.
But that was a long time ago in the sense of how far our country has come culturally in terms of inclusiveness and diversity.
Yeah, and we're proud of that. We're proud to see where America's gone today. It still has a long way to go. But back then, yeah, sure, there was some discriminatory behavior going on to the Indian immigrants, particularly in the insurance field, where they labeled one Patel for all Patels, not realizing Patels weren't necessarily related to each other. And that was I think part of it was just overcoming the education aspect of it.
Right.
But originally, that was one of the reasons why AAHOA had to be formed.
Right. And that's another question that I need to ask for the listenership out there. The name Patel. Right, it's a very common name. A lot of different families. What isn't it more of a title as opposed to just a traditional last name? How does that work?
Well, I'm not the expert in this. But
I'm going to guess Chip is not the expert.
I know Chip isn't, but
no,
my last name is Patel. And I'm blessed to be born and raised here in America, but I'm also grateful for the values that my father has provided me and my siblings and the rest of my family as he had to struggle by the very story I actually told you earlier. The Patel name, originally it's based on your profession, so to speak, as farmers back in the country of India. And everyone there is named Patel because everyone were farmers. And like I said, there's a lot of other angles and facts and history behind it that I would not be comfortable telling you anything more than this.
Right.
But I can tell you that given the name it's a surname that given to so many millions of people in a small geographic area, and as thousands and tens of thousands of them immigrate to America, over the course of 2 or 3 decades, of course, they're going to be mistaken for relatives when they come here.
Yeah, well, because other folks in other cultures don't really understand that. And 20 years ago when I came into this business, I think I probably scratched my head a little bit too, but it's such a long time ago, I don't necessarily remember that. Now, I have to assume, being a houseman, I come from a long line of butlering or something like that at some point in history. So I find that is really fascinating to me. So the organization was founded, and over time, its original purpose ceased to be because you had so much success, and the Asian American community started to be treated as equals, and now you're moving into a different realm, and this is where I could bring you into the conversation, Chip, because how did you get involved with the AAHOA organization?
I'm glad you remembered I was here.
Yes. Well, I really wanted to ask you some questions, but Bruce
I can tell you
really nailed that last stuff.
I can tell you all about the Patel name if you want to get back into that.
I do.
So it's interesting because the way we started out this conversation was a recognition that AAHOA inside the industry is so well known, and outside the industry is not very well known. Well, I happen to live and have lived my entire life in Atlanta, where AAHOA is headquartered.
Right.
And I was a lawmaker for many years, and I've stayed in many hotels and had never heard of AAHOA until one day AAHOA came to my office. And so I was working on some legislation dealing with property taxes, and it just so happened that if the legislation passed, which it ultimately did, it would be beneficial to those who have hotels and other large pieces of property. And so that's how we kind of formed the relationship. And where we began is that this incredible association had not really done much in the world of government affairs up until that point. And so I began helping them kind of navigate the waters of government affairs, which, as you know, can be quite treacherous. And one thing led to another, and then when I retired from politics, I moved on full-time to AAHOA, and here we are today.
Right, and when you first came on with AAHOA, you were in charge of the legislative part of it before assuming the presidency of the organization, right?
Well, I actually just did consulting for many years.
Just consulting, okay.
And then I started the Government Affairs Department and then became president.
Okay, right. That makes a lot of sense. So I find the government affairs thing very, very interesting and how influential the AAHOA organization has become. How did that happen?
Well, it was really just a lot of dedication, a lot of hard work, and a lot of commitment to putting the resources necessary in the right place to do that. Because, you know, you can all say, hey, I went to Washington, D.C. and had a meeting today. But if you just have that one meeting that one time, it's really irrelevant. You have to have constant pressure. You've got to be there at all times. You've got to move yourself into that position where you become a trusted resource for lawmakers. Because having been a lawmaker before and knowing hundreds, if not thousands of them, I can tell you that in general they want to do the right thing, but absent having the right information, sometimes they get it wrong. And so they don't know what the life of a hotelier is. They have no idea what Bruce does every day.
No.
Absolutely no idea. So the only way to actually tell that story is to have Bruce come tell them. What I find most interesting is that so many of these lawmakers, they love to meet with the AAHOA members because in many ways we kind of look as the embodiment of the American dream is something that has kind of begun to pass by us as a nation. And here, before you, if you're a lawmaker sitting there talking to an AAHOA member, you have somebody who's living it today. And that's exciting for a lot of lawmakers. They love to hear the story that Bruce just told. Here's somebody that comes from another country with all these barriers, but through hard work, through risk-taking, which is something that most Americans don't want to do anymore, through borrowing money from friends and relatives, you're able to build this business and continue to build this business. And the value that these guys put into education is amazing. The second and third generation guys are there, and they're coming back building these businesses even bigger because their parents said, not only would I like you to be part of the business, but I want you to go get educated first.
Right. And
it's a whole different story, and it really is, as I mentioned a moment ago, it's the embodiment of the American dream, and lawmakers love to hear those stories.
Right. Now, you know, Bruce, your dad came over here, and he was focused on getting that one property so he could feed his family. And then you got brought up through the hotel and really learned the business in a very different way than he did because he was already an older person. It's kind of the embodiment of your being, probably, being in the hotel industry, right? So I think it's only natural after you got the education. Now you guys in the second generation are really taking it to a different level than your parents were able to because of the position that they were in, right?
Absolutely. Look, you know, we're able to take advantage of the biggest thing, knowing America.
Right.
Knowing how America works and knowing the target markets that are coming and staying at our hotels because we're one of them. You know, when my dad grew up in India and came here for an education, his education was in engineering. He stumbled into this business, as I mentioned, but myself, I grew up in a small independent property. And I learned this business from the inside out. So I lived, eat, breathed it, literally. And now, today, as I'm developing hotels, I'm able to use the design trends that are going on in this industry. Millennials, needs of the millennials, the technology needs that tomorrow's guests for hotels will need. I'm able to use that and implement it now in the development of my properties. That's a big I'm able to advance my learning curve as a result of being in this industry for so long, and I'm very blessed to be able to say that.
Yeah, it's pretty. It's just so interesting to me watching how the first generation into the second generation and now into the third generation in a lot of cases with how everybody's been able to build. And, you know, my understanding is traditionally everybody came in and they started more on the economy level properties because those were the lowest barrier of entry to get into. Now a lot of folks are building much, much more impressive type of hotels because you were raised in that background. You have that insight and, you know, you have decades and decades of experience already, so you're much farther ahead than anybody who could just walking into the business. If I tried getting into the hotel business now, I would have to learn so much more. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, Glenn, that is, I guess you can say, just an advantage of being a second and third generation AAHOA member. And you see today, second generation AAHOA members are developing AC by Marriott properties in downtown markets, dual-branded properties, soft-branded boutique properties. I mean, you name it, and AAHOA members are developing it because they're seeing that where there's an opportunity to take advantage of in a market that it makes sense to, we'll take the risk to do it.
Mm-hmm. Chip, what do you find fascinating about the hotel industry that made you go in this direction?
You know, it's not so much the hotel industry, though it is fascinating, and I get to meet really good people like yourself, Glenn.
I paid him to say that, by the way.
No, my fascination is more geared towards the AAHOA member. You've got to think about the environment that I came out of, and that was, as I now call myself a recovering politician, but prior to that,
what was your position in politics?
I was the majority leader of the Georgia Senate.
Wow.
And so I was a serial entrepreneur before that. And so that has always kind of run through my blood. And then for a decade of my life, I'm dealing with bureaucracy at the highest level, and perhaps you would call it at the worst level, right? And if you think about the mindset of what we would all typically think of government bureaucrats, not bad people, but what they want to do every day is much different than the entrepreneur. And so I got to leave that environment and go 180 degrees to now I get to wake up every day and work with 16,000 people who eat, sleep, drink, breathe entrepreneurship, the American dream, building a business and leaving it for your children and your grandchildren. And that is extremely exciting. So if these 16,000 people were in the shoemaking business, I'd still want to be part of them, right? If they were in the bakery business, I'd still want to be part of them. So it's really the people and this mindset that they have that is so rare now, unfortunately, in our country, that's what I thrive on every day. So it's just an amazing group of people.
That's excellent. So I want to shift a little bit and talk about the nature of politics and some of the things that you're starting to go. As we're recording this, we're 27 days from the presidential election, and I do not want to talk about that because that's not gonna really educate anybody here. But I am curious to see what are the issues that you find are most important in the hospitality industry, and how are you getting out there every day and influencing? Well, not necessarily influencing as much as educating the politicians as to what the issues are and how they should, help small businesses and entrepreneurs.
Well, I'm not going to break your rule on talking about the presidential election, but
you can.
I will say this, that the problem that the American political sphere has today is that so few people that are successful in business actually want to go into politics. And the reason they don't want to go into politics, and I saw many of my very good friends who in very quick time, very short order, got in and got out of politics because they realized that the life of someone who is an entrepreneur and the life of someone who wants to achieve something is not well suited in politics because the system just eats you up so quickly.
And not only that, but I've enjoyed my life. And if I was to try to get into politics, people would start talking about all the things I've enjoyed in my life, and that's not really good for my soul.
Well, without going into the presidential realm too much, just look what the candidates themselves are having to put up with.
Right.
I mean, when people are looking back in your life 30 years ago and making allegations and whatever, it doesn't matter what side you're on, that's not what we need. What we need is to foster an environment where people that are successful in business are willing to give back. That's what public service is really about. Mm-hmm. But they're not willing to do it anymore because they don't want to have to live through what these politicians have to live through. And the ones that are willing to live through it, honestly, are not necessarily the people you want in office.
No.
So the problem is that I say this all the time, there's just not enough people who hold elective office who have signed the front of a paycheck. Someone who's run a business, understands what it means to make payroll, understands what it means to start something, have your entire family basis on the line when you first start that business and wondering when's the next customer coming through the door. Because that's what these people live. And when you've gone through that, you have a different perspective on the role of government in someone else's life and the role of government in business. We just don't have enough of that, whether it's in Congress or at the city council level. We need more people that have been successful in business to be willing to give back through public service.
Right. Now, I don't pretend that we're going to be able to solve that problem right here in this conversation, but I do find it interesting is how do you get beyond that barrier when you're trying to talk to folks that are in politics?
Well, the learning curve is quite difficult because when we go in and try to explain things like how a hotel runs or explain things like how rulings like the National Labor Relations Board joint employer don't work at all in a franchise model, sometimes you kind of get that deer in the headlight look from the
like the one I'm giving you right now.
Right. Well, because they don't understand. They've never had to live it. They've never run a business. They've certainly never run a franchise business, and most definitely they haven't run a hotel. So there is a lot of education to kind of get that person to a point where they can see it through the lens that you're
Right.
seeing it through. And so, given the time constraints on members of Congress and just elected officials everywhere, it's very, very difficult to do. But the alternative to that, not doing it, is very dangerous for your business.
Right, because if you don't take control, somebody else with a differing opinion is going to take control.
A differing opinion who has different motives, and their motives are most often not involved in creating jobs and opportunity.
So, Bruce, what is the top issue or top couple of issues that you're most concerned right now about?
Well, I'll say in general that the issue when you talk about a hotel owner, like AAHOA members in general, we're small business owners. And when you talk about a small business owner anywhere in this country, AAHOA could literally be the poster child for small business owners.
Well, I almost look at it as you're representing not just the hotel industry small business owners, but all small business owners.
Absolutely. I mean, AAHOA members may own one hotel. A AAHOA member may own 10 hotels. A AAHOA member may own a couple dozen hotels. But let's take it back to that AAHOA member that only owns one hotel, a 100-room hotel that then the family is operating. And now all of a sudden you have a regulation thrown at you that you had no voice in, and for no other reason than looks like political, smells political, walks political, but it's going to affect my hotel in the tunes of $10,000 to $20,000 to $30,000 a year. In some cases, that could be on a bad year.
That's a huge amount of money.
Not only my profit, but it could be my loss. And so to box everything and every business into one lump perspective is, I think, a big problem in this country. And when they don't take into consideration small business perspective, everybody talks a big game, red or blue, that, hey, small business is the growth engine of this country. They're the ones creating the jobs. But I sure wish they'd look at the lens. All these regulations, when you talk about a agency or when you talk about lawmakers, I wish they'd look through the lens of a small business owner.
Yeah, it's got to be tough because if you're a politician, then you need to look after the small businesses and big businesses and the citizenry, right? So how do you negotiate all of that, Chip?
Well, the most dangerous thing that I think has happened in the country, without making too much a political statement, is that politicians will oftentimes pit business against individuals, it's really sad because businesses can't survive unless individuals are willing to buy their product or service. So why would they be pitted against each other?
Right.
But that's the game they play. I mean, you hear all the things about Wall Street this, big business this. At the end of the day, if you don't want big business to survive, if you don't like Walmart, don't go shop there. No one told,
right.
You're not forced to go shop there. So that's really one of the unfortunate circumstances that exists in today's political world. But again, our challenge is educating elected officials who have very little background in business about what it is like on a daily basis. I'll give you an example. When this new rule that is out now on doubling the threshold on overtime, I guess it sounds good to some professor at an Ivy League school, but the reality is for the hotel owner who may have 10 to 12 employees who fall under that threshold, it's not like they have built into their budget the ability to just start paying them overtime.
Right.
So all they're going to do is cut their hours. And so for that person who was a salaried employee and now they're going to be switched to becoming an hourly employee, that's a step backwards for them. And so business owners by necessity will work their way around this problem, and the people who will ultimately feel the brunt of it are the very employees the politicians claim they were going to help to begin with.
That's really funny because a lot of times, and I'll just say that politicians get into it to help the people, that they wind up hurting the people they're trying to help inadvertently, and you have to act as that educational conduit to make sure they see things clearly.
Well, I think there's a misperception that by many elected officials that I'll just use hotel owners for an example, that they have this big pot of profit money that they're just sitting on over there, and
right,
and they're just hoarding it all, and that they don't want to give any to the employees. That nothing could be further from the truth.
Well, I've seen everyone flies in on their private jets to all of your events. So,
listen, if
sat in coach on the way here today, by the way.
Thank you, Southwest.
I can promise you, if you look at all the scales of hotels, the ones that we stay at are the lower scale because we're trying to pinch a penny every chance too. But Just to that larger point, what they don't realize is that the entrepreneur who starts a business, if they have extra money, you know what they do? They go start another business and hire more people. They don't just sit on the cash. Nobody does that. And unfortunately, elected officials oftentimes don't get that.
Right. Interesting. So, we're running out of time. We've got to wrap up. What advice would you give hoteliers out there that want to become more politically involved and actually make a difference?
Well, some easy things. Somebody who wants to get involved in their local area, understand what races are going on in your area, whether it's mayoral races, city council races, your state congressman races. Get involved. Go attend the meetings. Your local congressman probably has a town hall meeting once a month that you can go and attend and meet and understand the what type of that person he or she is and how that person is representing you. So that's one easy way. A second way is actually go and get further involved in associations like AAHOA, where we have delegations that we take to Washington, D.C. So you can go and in a herd of hotel owners, a herd of small business owners, and go express and explain your story based on the issues that are affecting us. That's a second way. Third way is go vote. Vote for the right candidate that's going to represent you. And if you're a small business owner, then you need somebody elected that's going to represent small business.
Great. Chip, how could people get more involved in AAHOA?
2 words, join AAHOA.
Great. And how do they do that? How do they find you?
AAHOA.com, and everything you could ever want is on that website. And we it's the best value of any association you will find in America. What you get out from what you put in, 100-fold.
Great. And I want to know, I feel like we could have gone on for another hour, but the rumor being in right now, we're being so chased out of here, I'm going to have to bring you guys back to talk about all of those issues. Thank you so much for joining me here today, guys.
Thanks, Glenn.
Thanks.
Thanks so much for listening to No Vacancy, the hospitality industry's #1 podcast, with your host, Glenn Hausman, online at rouse.media, on Twitter at Traveling Glenn, and on Facebook.com/Glenn.Hausman. We'll catch you next time.